There is a category of danger that does not announce itself with sirens, does not appear on weather alerts, and does not give you the courtesy of a visible countdown. It is the danger of proximity, the specific, measurable, scientifically documented risk that comes not from what is happening around you, but from what you are standing next to. Most people assess their personal safety in terms of crime statistics, natural disaster frequency, or distance from conflict. These are reasonable metrics for a functioning world. But emergency management science operates on a completely different framework, one that the general public rarely encounters until it is too late to act on it. That framework is called critical infrastructure vulnerability mapping, and what it reveals about where millions of people currently live is not a matter of political opinion or survivalist speculation. It is a matter of physics, engineering, population density calculations, and the documented cascading failure patterns that emergency planners have studied for decades. The core finding of this science is precise and uncomfortable. Certain infrastructure points, when they fail, whether through natural disaster, systemic overload, or any other cause, do not merely stop providing services. They actively generate danger zones that expand outward from their location, and the people living inside those zones do not experience the failure as a distant news event. They experience it as a direct physical threat to their survival. The first infrastructure category that emergency planners classify as highest proximity risk is electrical transmission substations. Specifically, the high-voltage transmission substations that step power down from the bulk transmission grid to the distribution level that feeds neighborhoods and cities. The misunderstanding most people carry about electrical infrastructure is that a substation failure is simply a power outage. This is an almost complete misreading of what actually occurs. A high-voltage substation contains transformer equipment operating at between 115,000 and 765,000 volts, with oil-cooled transformer cores that hold thousands of gallons of mineral oil as a cooling and insulating medium. When a transformer fails catastrophically, through overload, physical damage, or internal fault, the result is not a quiet shutdown. The mineral oil, superheated by the electrical arc, can ignite and produce a fire that burns at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius, releasing toxic combustion byproducts including polychlorinated biphenyls in older equipment, and creating pressure explosions that project burning debris across significant distances. The contamination radius from a major transformer fire, documented across multiple real-world incidents, extends far beyond the fence line of the facility. People living within a half-mile radius of a large transmission substation are inside the documented impact zone for this failure mode, yet the overwhelming majority have never been informed of this fact by any public authority. The second category is natural gas pressure regulation stations and compressor stations, the facilities that maintain the pressure levels in natural gas transmission pipelines and step gas down for distribution into urban areas. These stations operate under pressures between 200 and 1,500 pounds per square inch, moving methane at flow rates that represent enormous stored energy potential. The hidden science here involves the concept of unconfined vapor cloud explosions, a failure mode studied extensively in industrial accident analysis. When a significant natural gas release occurs near an ignition source, which in any populated area is effectively guaranteed given the density of electrical equipment, vehicles, and open flame sources, the resulting vapor cloud explosion does not behave like a contained industrial accident. It behaves like a pressure wave event. The overpressure generated by a large unconfined gas explosion, documented in incidents like the 2010 San Bruno pipeline explosion in California, is sufficient to destroy wood-frame residential structures at distances of several hundred feet, and to cause serious injury from flying debris and pressure wave effects at distances exceeding a quarter mile. People living within this radius of a gas compressor or high-pressure regulation station are not near a piece of utility infrastructure. They are near a potential overpressure event, and the difference between those two descriptions is the difference between inconvenience and survival. The third category, and the one that carries the longest duration threat profile of any infrastructure type, is water treatment and wastewater processing facilities. The failure mode here is not explosive or immediately thermal. It is biological, and it operates on a timeline that makes it uniquely dangerous precisely because the consequences are not visible in the first hours or even the first days after a failure event. A water treatment plant serving a major urban area processes millions of gallons daily, maintaining chemical balances that prevent the growth of pathogens including cholera, typhoid, cryptosporidium, and giardia. When that treatment process fails, through power loss, chemical supply interruption, or physical damage, the water already in the distribution system does not immediately become dangerous. It becomes dangerous on a delay, and that delay is precisely what makes the biological failure mode of water infrastructure so devastating in a collapse scenario. The pathogens that water treatment chemistry suppresses do not appear instantaneously. They proliferate on a biological timeline that takes between 24 and 96 hours to reach concentrations capable of causing widespread illness in a population consuming the water without awareness of the treatment failure. By the time symptoms appear in the first wave of affected people, the exposure has already occurred across the entire service area. Historical evidence for this pattern is not theoretical. The 1993 Milwaukee cryptosporidium outbreak, caused by a failure in water treatment filtration, infected over 400,000 people within a single service area before the contamination was identified and the system was shut down. That event occurred in a functioning society with intact communication infrastructure and emergency medical capacity. In a scenario where those systems are simultaneously degraded, the biological cascade from a water treatment failure becomes a primary mortality driver that operates invisibly and silently across the entire population living within the distribution network of the failed facility. The fourth infrastructure category that places proximate populations into direct threat zones is cellular and internet transmission infrastructure. Specifically, the large data centers and cellular switching facilities that now serve as the nervous system of modern emergency communication. The misunderstanding here is almost universal. Most people believe that communication infrastructure failure is an inconvenience, a disruption to social media and streaming services. What emergency management science actually documents is that communication infrastructure failure is a force multiplier for every other failure type. When cellular networks go down in a crisis zone, emergency services lose coordination capacity, evacuation orders cannot be transmitted, medical triage cannot be organized, and the behavioral response of the affected population defaults to individual panic rather than organized action. The documented death toll differential between disasters with intact communication infrastructure and those without is not marginal. Studies of hurricane response outcomes consistently show that communication blackout zones experience mortality rates 3 to 5 times higher than areas with maintained cellular coverage, even when the physical damage from the storm event itself is comparable. People living within the service shadow of a single point of failure communication facility, a zone that can be identified by mapping the coverage dependency of local cellular towers on a single switching center, are carrying an invisible vulnerability that does not manifest until the exact moment when they need communication capacity most urgently. The fifth and most broadly distributed infrastructure threat category is fuel storage and distribution terminals, the large above-ground storage tank farms that hold refined petroleum products at the edge of most major metropolitan areas and along major transportation corridors. These facilities are classified under the Environmental Protection Agency's Risk Management Program specifically because their failure modes generate off-site consequence zones that extend into surrounding residential and commercial areas. The science governing this is the behavior of boil-over events in large crude oil or heavy fuel storage tanks, and the behavior of bleave events, boiling liquid expanding vapor explosions, in pressurized fuel storage. A bleave event in a large propane or liquefied petroleum gas storage vessel generates a fireball and pressure wave combination that emergency planners model as potentially lethal across a radius of several hundred meters, with serious burn injury potential extending to over half a kilometer from the storage vessel. People living in the mapped consequence zones of fuel terminals, zones that are documented in public regulatory filings but rarely communicated directly to residents, are living inside a failure consequence boundary that was drawn by engineers who understand exactly what the physics of that failure produces. What connects all 5 of these infrastructure categories is a principle that emergency management science calls proximity risk accumulation. Individual infrastructure points generate individual risk zones. But the majority of people living in developed metropolitan areas do not live near one of these facility types. They live near several simultaneously, because the same geographic and logistical factors that make land suitable for one type of infrastructure installation, flat terrain, road access, proximity to population centers, availability of utility connections, make it suitable for multiple types. The cumulative proximity risk of living within the consequence zone of a substation, a gas pressure station, a water treatment facility, and a fuel terminal simultaneously is not the sum of those individual risks. It is a compounding factor, because in any serious systemic disruption, these facilities do not fail independently. They fail in cascade sequences, each failure accelerating and amplifying the next, creating an expanding threat envelope that the surrounding population has no pre-planned response to because the pre-planning was never communicated to them. Recognizing which infrastructure points surround your current location, understanding the documented failure modes and consequence zones of each, and developing a proximity-aware evacuation logic before any event occurs, that is not paranoia. That is the application of the same risk science that the engineers who built these facilities used when they decided where to build them, and crucially, where not to live themselves.